The klaxon was a physical thing. Not a sound, but a force. It was a synthetic, soul-scouring shriek that ripped through the dead air of the derelict. A dentist's drill boring directly into the brainstem. It hammered against the bulkheads, vibrated up through the soles of Kael's boots, and settled deep in his marrow. The Hegemony's standardized funeral dirge for its condemned assets. Red light bled from every emergency strip, strobing in a frantic, syncopated rhythm with the alarm, painting their faces in washes of blood and shadow. Each pulse was a heartbeat. The ships. Theirs, counting down. 20 minutes. Thorne's voice, a gravelly shard of static in his memory, was already being drowned out by the noise. Get out or get vaporized. A choice that wasn't a choice. It was an order wrapped in the illusion of mercy. The data chip in his pocket felt impossibly heavy, a singularity of truth, pulling his entire existence into its orbit. Captain Rhys's final, damning testament. The Cinder margin. A war fought not to be won, but to be lost. A culling. Every soldier he'd ever served with, every civilian who'd given their life for the glorious expansion, every ounce of faith he'd ever been forced to feign, all of it curdled into a cold, dense knot of poison in his gut. The pressure of 1,000 atmospheres was nothing. He'd lived with that. This, the weight of this one lie, was going to crush them all. Move. The word was a raw tear in his own throat, barely audible over the ship's death rattle. He grabbed Jax by the shoulder, the kid's body trembling like a tuning fork. Jax's eyes were wide, unfocused, pupils dilated to black pools, reflecting the strobing crimson. He was seeing more than the corridor ahead. He was seeing the hive, feeling its panic, its rage at this intrusion, this violent, screaming violation of its new home. Sloane was already on it, her hand on Jax's other arm, her voice a low, steady anchor in the storm. Jax, focus on me, on my voice. One foot, then the other. That's all. Her professionalism was a thing of cold beauty. In the flickering hell light, the lines of her face were stark, etched with a fatigue that went deeper than muscle. But her hands were steady as she checked the charge on her pulse rifle. She met Kael's gaze over Jax's head, and in that fleeting second, a universe of understanding passed between them. The horror, the betrayal, the crushing responsibility of the truth he now carried. Her nod was infinitesimal, but it was there. I'm with you. Get us out of here. He turned, leading them back the way they came. Every instinct screaming. The route was a known quantity, but that was the problem. They knew the way. So did the ship's other inhabitants. The air tasted of ozone and something else, something acrid and sweetly rotten, like meat left too long. It was the smell of the hive, a biological stench that clung to the recycled oxygen and coated the back of his tongue. The deck plates groaned under his feet. The whole superstructure of the Endeavor, protesting its own imminent demise. Small arms fire from a lifetime ago echoed in his head. The muscle memory of combat, a phantom limb twitching to life. He wasn't a salvager anymore. He wasn't a disgraced officer. He was what they'd recycled him to be, a weapon. And a weapon's only purpose was to be pointed and fired. They rounded a corner into a long service corridor. The walls lined with conduits and blackened panels. The red strobes fought a losing battle against the oppressive darkness at the far end. And from that darkness, movement. It wasn't a sound at first, but a feeling. A subtle shift in the air pressure, a wrongness that pricked the hairs on his arms. Then the sound came a wet, chitinous clattering that was utterly alien to the metallic groans of the ship. It was the sound of too many legs moving too fast. Contact. Kael barked, his rifle snapping up to his shoulder, the motion as natural as breathing. 3 of them boiled out of the shadows. They were sleeker than the ones in the archive vids, smaller, built for speed. Scythe-like limbs unfolded from their torsos, glistening under the emergency lights, like obsidian dipped in oil. They didn't roar. They hissed, a sound like steam escaping a cracked boiler. Their eyeless heads sweeping the corridor, tasting the air, sensing the vibration of their prey. Time didn't just slow. It fractured. Kael's world narrowed to the glowing green reticle of his sight. He saw the play of light on their carapaces, the drip of viscous fluid from their jaws, the way the muscles bunched in their hind legs an instant before they launched. His mind was a cold, clear stream of calculation. Target 1. Center mass. Target 2. Head. Target 3. Flanking. He squeezed the trigger. The pulse rifle coughed, a sharp, energetic crack that was swallowed by the Klaxon's shriek. The first creature convulsed as the superheated plasma bolt hit its thorax, blowing a fist-sized, cauterized hole through its midsection. It staggered, acid blood sizzling on the deck plates in a cloud of noxious green vapor. Sloane fired a split second after him, her shot a clean, efficient burst that shattered the second creature's skull. It dropped like a stone, its limbs twitching in a grotesque, silent dance. The third one was smart. It used the vapor cloud from its dying sibling as cover, scuttling low along the wall, a black smear against the crimson-lit metal. It was impossibly fast. Kael tracked it, leading the shot, but it was already leaping, its trajectory a perfect arc, aimed at the weakest point in their formation. Jax. Jax, down, Sloane screamed, shoving him hard against the bulkhead. There was no time for Kael to fire again. He just moved, abandoning his firing stance, lunging forward to put his own body between the creature and the others. The world became a blur of red light and black chitin. He felt a searing, incandescent pain in his left shoulder as a talon sliced through his combat suit and into the flesh beneath. The impact was like being hit by a freight train, slamming him back against the wall. The creature's weight was immense, its acrid stench overwhelming. Its inner jaw, a piston of serrated bone and teeth, shot out. Inches from his face, he could feel its hot, foul breath. He could see his own terrified reflection in the smooth black dome of its head. This was it. The ignoble end. Crushed and consumed in a dying ship carrying the greatest secret in human history. A deafening roar erupted beside his ear. Not the rifle's sharp crack, but the guttural boom of a sidearm. The creature's head exploded in a shower of ichor and splintered bone. Its grip loosened, its dead weight slumping against him. He shoved the corpse away, stumbling, his shoulder, screaming in protest. Sloane stood over him, her pistol still smoking, her face a mask of grim determination. "Don't you ever do that again," she hissed, her voice shaking with adrenaline. "He was the target," Kael grunted, clutching his shoulder. Blood, dark and hot, was already soaking through the fabric. They know he's the weak one. He looked at Jax, who was curled into a ball on the floor, hands clamped over his ears, rocking back and forth. "The Hive, it's screaming," the boy whimpered. "They angry. They're all coming." Sloane was already at Kael's side, her medical scanner humming as she assessed the wound. "It's deep, but it missed the artery. I can't seal it properly here." She slapped a coagulant patch over the gash. The chemical sting a fresh wave of agony. "This will have to do. Can you move?" "I have to," Kael said through clenched teeth. The pain was a sharp, clarifying thing, cutting through the fog of betrayal. It reminded him he was alive. It reminded him he had a job to do. He pushed himself to his feet, the deck swaying beneath him. Or maybe that was him. The Klaxon continued its relentless assault. 15 minutes. "This weighs a kill box," Kael said, his mind racing, already discarding their original plan. "They'll be expecting us to run for the breach. We need another way." He scanned the corridor, his eyes falling on a service hatch set into the floor, its designation stenciled in faded yellow. Jeffries, Tube 7B. Gamma, a crawl space. Dirty, tight, slow, and perfect. "It's a long shot," Sloane said, her eyes following his. "We don't know where it leads. It leads away from here." Kael countered, "And they won't follow us in numbers. Too small. It's our only chance." He didn't wait for an argument. He limped to the hatch and wrenched the manual release lever. It groaned in protest, sealed by years of neglect, but finally gave way with a percussive clang. A blast of cool, stale air washed over them, carrying the scent of old wiring and dust. Below was absolute darkness. "Get in," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for debate. "Sloane, you take point. I'll bring up the rear. Help Jax." She nodded, slinging her rifle and grabbing a mag light from her belt. She clicked it on, the powerful beam cutting a stark white tunnel into the black. Without a word, she lowered herself into the tube. Kael helped a trembling Jax through the opening, the boy's movements clumsy and uncoordinated. Finally, Kael swung his own legs in, the motion sending a fresh bolt of white-hot agony through his shoulder. He grit his teeth, the taste of copper filling his mouth, and pulled the heavy hatch closed above them, plunging them into a world of echoing metal and claustrophobic dark. The only light was the bobbing circle of Sloane's beam up ahead. The only sound, apart from the muffled, ever-present klaxon, was the scrape of their bodies against the narrow ducting and their own ragged breathing, amplified in the confined space. It was a metal coffin, barely wide enough for his shoulders. The air was thick with the dust of ages, each breath a gritty ordeal. Every few feet, a bundle of thick, insulated cables pressed down from the ceiling, forcing them to squirm and crawl. His mind, trapped in the dark, with nothing but the pain and the rhythmic scraping, began to turn on itself. He thought of his discharge, the mission that went wrong, the faces of the soldiers he'd lost, their accusations echoing in the silence between heartbeats. He had made a choice then, a pragmatic choice to save the many by sacrificing the few. A commander's choice. The Hegemony had called it cowardice. Now he was carrying a truth that indicted the entire system that had condemned him, and he was crawling through the guts of a ghost ship with a wounded shoulder, a shell, shocked psychic, and a medic who hated everything he used to stand for. The irony was a bitter pill. A frantic scrabbling sound echoed from behind them. Not the slow, pained shuffle of his own movement, but something sharp, metallic, faster. Kael. Sloane's voice, tight with anxiety, came back down the tube. What was that? Don't stop, he ordered, his own voice a low growl. They're in the walls. He could feel it now. A vibration in the metal against his chest. A faint, high-pitched chittering that seemed to come from everywhere at once. They weren't in the tube with them. Not yet. They were moving around them, above them, below them. Hunting. The ship wasn't just a structure. It was a living organism. And they were a foreign body being swarmed by antibodies. Jax let out a choked sob up ahead. So many, he whispered, his voice cracking. They know where we are. They feel us. The light, the heat. They're closing the net. The kid's a liability, the old Kael whispered in the back of his mind. He's a beacon. A dead man walking, and he'll take you with him. No, he thought, shoving the voice down. He's my soldier. No soldier left behind. But this time, the words weren't hegemony dogma. They were his own, a promise made in the dark. The tube began to vibrate more intensely. A deep groaning shudder ran through the entire length of the vessel, accompanied by the shriek of tearing metal. A primary structural support, somewhere deep in the ship's skeleton, had just failed. The self-destruct wasn't a single event. It was a cascade failure. The Endeavor was tearing itself apart from the inside out. Double time, Sloane yelled. I see a ladder ahead. I think it leads to the lower hangar bay. The crawl became a desperate scramble. Kael's shoulder was a nexus of pure agony, but he ignored it, using his legs and his good arm to propel himself forward. The scuttling in the walls grew louder, more frantic. They were running out of time, not just from the sequence, but from the hunt. They reached the ladder. Sloane was already climbing, pulling Jax up after her. Kael followed, his boots finding the rungs, every upward pull a fresh torture for his shoulder. He emerged into a cavernous space, one of the Endeavor's secondary hangar bays. Emergency lighting cast long, distorted shadows across the deck. Empty docking clamps hung from the ceiling like skeletal fingers. And at the far end of the bay, he saw it. A gaping, jagged wound in the ship's outer hull. Moonlight. Freedom. But they weren't alone. It was waiting for them, standing between them and the breach. It was bigger than the others, its chitin a dull, matte black that seemed to drink the light. Its forelimbs were heavier, more like brutal cleavers than scythe. A Praetorian, a hive guardian. It stood perfectly still, its domed head slowly turning towards them, as if it had been expecting them all along. The smaller drones skittered around its feet, a chittering, hissing court of razor-sharp death. The Klaxon seemed to fade away, replaced by a roaring in Kael's ears. Every rational instinct told him to run. But he saw the set of Sloane's jaw, the way she shielded Jax behind her, her rifle already shouldering. He saw the cold, lunar light spilling through that hole in the ship, a promise of survival just meters away. The weight in his pocket, the weight of the lie, settled on him once more. He wasn't just fighting for their lives. He was fighting for Rhys's. For every soldier sacrificed on the altar of the Cinder margin, he was fighting for the truth. He raised his rifle, the sight wavering as he fought the pain in his shoulder. The Praetorian let out a piercing, whistling shriek that vibrated in his teeth. It was a challenge, a death sentence. On my mark, Kael breathed, his voice steady, professional. Concentrate fire on the head. In the strobing red light of a dying ship, surrounded by monsters, burdened by a truth that could shatter worlds, Kael Voss prepared to fight a war he finally believed in.